Welcome everyone attending this discussion of pathways to a climate positive county, buildings, consumption and mobility. Yes, we can decarbonize and demethanize. I'm Carl Held of the Climate Mobilization Montgomery County, Maryland chapter, and will be your moderator for this evening. This is our fifth in a series of regular webinars focused on creating the best possible county climate action plan with the broadest possible public participation. TCM is a national leader in the climate emergency and the climate truth, that there is an existential crisis unfolding around us, and humanity must change course or perish. As you may know, the TCM chapter in Montgomery County was one of the lead climate groups for getting the County Council in December 2017 to unanimously approve a resolution declaring a climate emergency with a strict goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2027 and 100% by 2035. Before we get started, I want to thank several TCM members who have been instrumental in planning this webinar. Natalie Wemmers is hosting the Zoom meeting and providing technical support during the webinar. Nancy Wilkinson is our backup moderator if needed. Dorcas Robinson, Louise Mitchell, and Andy Miller are co-hosts, managing the slide presentation, monitoring the chat room, and supporting the Q&A portion of our program. The remainder of our agenda includes presentations by three main speakers, brief responses from several Montgomery County panelists, and then a Q&A session for all speakers and panelists and all of you as well. And then we'll have a wrap up and next steps. Before we get started, I want to mention a couple of webinar protocol. Please stay muted. We are a large group today. If you are from outside the county, do use the chat room to let us know where you are from and any affiliation. We would love to know who is interested in learning with us. Please use the chat box at any time to submit questions for the Q&A session. This webinar is being recorded for sharing, and the link will be included along with key ideas for follow-up actions in an email to all registrants. The overall purpose of our webinar series is primarily threefold. We would like to familiarize you with some ideas about transforming Montgomery County into a climate-positive environment and addressing the well-being of every citizen in the county. We want to bring you the climate perspectives of several main speakers and local panelists. And we want to open the door and encourage your participation in the review of the draft Emergency Climate Resilience Action and Resilience Plan, which is being made available this November and should be finalized in early 2021. Today's webinar focuses on the importance of pursuing bold and innovative actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our electric power systems, buildings, and the transportation sector to advance efforts to decarbonize and demethanize our county. Our main speakers and panelists will discuss ideas from their experiences on actions at both the state and county levels that have the opportunity to produce big changes in emissions. The Q&A session will enable attendees to address questions via the chat to specific speakers or open discussion by all panelists. So let's get started. Our first speaker is Dr. Arjun Makhijani. He is president of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research and holds a PhD in engineering, specializing in nuclear fusion from the University of California at Berkeley. He has produced many studies and articles on nuclear fuel cycle related issues, including weapons production, testing, and nuclear waste over the past 20 years. He is the principal author of the first study ever done in 1971 on energy conservation potential in the US economy. Most recently, Dr. Makhijani has authored Carbon-Free and Nuclear-Free, a roadmap for US policy, the first analysis of a transition to a US economy completely centered on renewable energy. without any use of fossil fuels or nuclear power. He is the principal editor of Nuclear Wastelands and the principal author of Mending the Ozone Hole, both published by MIT Press. Arjun, we're happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Carl. I've also done a lot of work. So I guess you need to allow me to share my screen, Carl. If you'll stop sharing your screen.
Arjun will take care of that.
You can, Arjun, can you share your screen?
Okay. All right. Where are my slides? There you go. Okay. Yeah, I've also done a lot of work on Maryland, and what I'm going to present today is based on my Maryland work, Prosperous Renewable Maryland, basically a roadmap for renewable energy in Maryland with energy justice. And then I updated that in 2018 after the IPCC report came out on the 1.5 Celsius temperature rise limit and what we need to do. And then working with Carl and Nancy and Dorcas, I've tried to adjust this thing to be centered on the Montgomery County climate resolution. And so, you know, this is not a complete plan. It's more of a sketch and a vision. So with that caveat, let me kind of launch in. So Montgomery County's goals are, I'm sure you know, maybe the most ambitious that I have seen, 80% reduction by 2027 and 100% elimination of emissions by 2035. For comparison, when I did the state roadmap, you know, my state roadmap based on my work of since 2012, based on the IPCC report, that was net zero by 2045 and then negative after that, you know, sequestration, agriculture, forestry, all that. And so what we're talking about in Montgomery County is more ambitious than the IPCC. I don't think any of you have illusions that it's going to be easy. Even the Maryland targets 100% by 2045, 60% by 2030 are quite difficult. Montgomery County's targets are extremely difficult. The upside of that is that if the county actually looks like it's going to achieve it or even come close, it'll be exemplary for the whole world. Certainly for our whole state, for the country, and I think for the world. So this is a greenhouse gas pie chart for the county. About half of on the right, the emissions are from residential and commercial buildings. So that's within the county's control. Some of that is electricity, 13% and 17%, so 30 of the 50 is electricity. And then 20 of the 50 is fossil fuels. So this is 1% of minor other stuff. But about 50% is buildings, and that's mostly in the county's control. Could use some help from the state, but it's in the county's control because the county sets the building codes. It can do a lot of things. Transportation, I think, is 42%. That, I think it'll be joint work between the county and the state. I'll outline that. So I'm giving you a little bit of a sketch. The rest is half of the rest, or more than half of the rest, is these hydrofluorocarbons for which the state is developing a plan. And if the county wants to get there, it'll have to accelerate that plan. That means your refrigerators and car air conditioners mostly, and then your solid waste burning. Okay, so that's the sketch of the emissions as they stand at the most recent inventory produced by the county. So let me go over where we're starting. It's important to have
Arjun, your slides are difficult to see. Can you do full screen, please?
Let's see. Yeah, full screen. Full screen. Let me see. Full screen.
Start the slideshow.
Let's see. Slideshow. There. Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So our present energy system is reliable, but it's unaffordable for many. Almost 20% of the state's households are eligible for energy assistance, and they're not very generous criteria. Not the worst in the country, but not the best. It's inflexible, inefficient. Those of you who lived through the derecho like I did in 2012 know it's not very resilient. It's polluting. We go for war for oil. That's why there's the picture of that tanker. And our electricity system, you know, we want a smart grid, so obviously it implies that we have a dumb grid. So let me go through for you how inefficient the existing system is. So these are the main power plants that we have: coal and nuclear. There's also gas-fired power plants, which are similar thermal combined cycle power plants. Most of our power plants are thermal power plants, which burn a fuel in the reactor. The fuel is inside the reactor, but it's basically a boiler. So it's only about 30% efficient on the fuel. So about 70% of the heat value of the fuel is discharged as waste heat to the water bodies around, like the Chesapeake Bay or rivers, Potomac River, or it is, some of it is lost in transmission and distribution before it comes to your house or business. What do we do with this 30% efficient system? The incandescent bulb is only 3% efficient in terms of converting the electricity to light, so 1% on the fuel. Our highly efficient vaunted technology, the LED bulb, only converts 20% of the electricity to visible light. So it's 6% efficient on the fuel for thermal power plants. That's our best technology. Cars, we go to war for oil. Alan Greenspan said that, Kissinger said that, so it's not an opinion from yours truly alone. About 80% of the fuel for which we go to war comes out the tailpipe. It's waste heat. Only 20% shows up as power at the wheels, and a lot of that is wasted. Drivetrain losses, as you can see, that's mechanical losses. So about 15% is mechanical energy in a thermal. This is a thermal system of a different kind, the internal combustion engine. All right. Doesn't include all the pipeline losses and refining losses and all that. Fracking, natural gas, nobody likes it. We have leaky homes, so that's a natural gas system. And then we have leaky homes, and we don't do a very good job of insulating them. The county is doing a good job of upgrading its building standards. What about the grid? So today, the main communication between you and the power suppliers and the utilities is the switch. You flip the switch, turn it on, flip it, turn it off. That's the communication system. All of the switches at the consumer's end, residential, commercial, industrial, whatever, can be fitted onto the memory of a $15 flash drive. That's why it's a dumb grid. Within the transmission and distribution system, it's much more complicated. But between consumers and producers is one way. The consumer dominates, flips the switch, and the system must respond. It's among the most wasteful industrial systems that we have. Only about 55% of the capacity is used on an annual average, maximum 60%, sometimes 50%. That's pretty wasteful for a capital-intensive system. Consumer has real-time information in a smart grid, so you need to build a communication system in parallel with the power system. That's what a smart grid is. Your dishwasher knows when there's cheap electricity available. That means lots of solar and wind. Your clothes washer knows. The little defrost coil in your freezer knows, which you don't even know probably that it exists. That's what defrosts your refrigerator, a little heater. And of course, consumers can be producers. So today there are hundreds of power plants. They're very large. In the future, there would be millions, and they would be on your rooftops and so on. You know that. All right, and then should adapt to variable supply. Sun doesn't shine, people tell me, don't you know, if sun doesn't shine, you know, yes, the definition of night is the sun is not shining and the wind doesn't blow. I know that, I'm an electrical engineer. So it has to be reliable and you have to be able to pay the bills. So reliable and affordable actually comes before anything else if you want a functional system. So renewable has to be reliable, affordable, and also more resilient. So those are the criteria. So that's an idea of a smart grid. And you know, you might have heard about microgrids, more local storage, storage is combined, electrified transportation, heating, cooling, all of that. You'll have these slides, so I won't dwell on explain. The only thing wrong about this picture that I don't like is the wind turbine on your rooftop. You don't want to do that, might blow off your roof. So I did calculations for the state of Maryland. When you eliminate thermal generation, that is the first thing that I showed you with the power plants, you eliminate 2/3 of the energy use for electricity production. Now you're electrifying everything. You electrify your cars, you eliminate 80% of that energy consumption, that's waste heat. You can actually double the size of the economy. Now that's a different discussion, you know, how much should the economy grow, how much should we consume? I won't get into that. But our energy consumption in Maryland in 2011 was 1,418 trillion BTU. And I started this work in 2012, so that's why the base is 2011. And you can double the size of the economy, and this work was finished in 2016 before, you know, the IPCC, most recent IPCC report. But if you just pay attention to the numbers, you can double the size of the economy and eliminate 60% of the energy use. You do have to make existing energy uses more efficient and electrify everything efficiently. The cost, in my opinion, will be cheaper than business as usual. And these are various estimates of cost because, you know, future costs are uncertain. So I always do a sensitivity analysis. And so a future 100% renewable electricity system will, and, you know, electrified transportation, all that, will be between 4 and 22% cheaper than business as usual. And at today's cost, these numbers would be even better because these numbers are a few years old. And solar has become, especially solar, has become a lot cheaper. So as I said, my plan so what should we do? So there are basically 3 areas in which we need to pay attention. Electricity, of course, the electricity appears in the building accounting. But we need to make the electricity sector 100% renewable. In the state, I think the target would be 2035 or 2040. The county could actually do it faster because if we get community choice energy, Delegate Charkoudian's bill, which I supported this year and will support again next year, the county can make power purchase agreements, buy cheap wind power, lower the cost of electricity. We need about 2,000 megawatts based on current electricity use, and then that would have to increase as transportation is completely electrified. But to give you an idea, there are about 13,000 megawatts of wind projects in the queue right now with our grid operator, PJM, which extends from Chicago to Maryland and Virginia and New Jersey. So it's not a big deal in the PJM grid operator to get. Basically, you have to enter into contracts with them and make them build, because most of these projects won't get built without contracts. They're in the queue, they're doing the studies, but they won't get built if they don't have a place to sell their electricity. They're called virtual power purchase agreements. We must abandon these buying paper electronic certificates from Texas for 50 cents and pretending that it's electricity. It's not. It's a waste of money. We absolutely have to stop buying electronic certificates separated from the electricity. Tim Whitehouse, who lives up county in Poolsville, has done a lot of wonderful work on that, and many of you may know him. In-county solar, rooftop, community solar, and so on. So we've got to sort out a lot of issues associated with that. I'll get to that a little bit. Done well, cost should come down, especially when combined with 2 to 3% a year efficiency improvements. And if we do microgrids and storage right, we will also be more resilient than the existing system. This is a non-trivial job. Anybody who tells you that this is going to be easy is fooling you. It is complicated. There are a lot of formulas out there, you know, do this, do that, and it'll be easy and cheap. No, it will be cheaper if you do it right. And if you address the business model of the utilities as well as the distribution system. Needs a lot of investment and a lot of reorienting and reorganizing our energy system and paying attention to the workers who will be displaced and low-income people. All right.
Arjun, if you could keep moving along, that'd be great.
All right. Buildings are 50%. Mandate rooftop for new detached buildings. It'll be cheaper. Builders may not like it, but I've done the study. Rooftop net zero energy should be mandated now. In my opinion, if the county doesn't mandate it, they're not serious about the climate emergency because it's economical. They know it, I know it. And if you look at the numbers, you will know it. Other buildings, you know, need some coordination between community, solar, dedicated, and rooftop. But new buildings, this should be done. Townhomes, multi-unit, it'll take some work, so it can't be done immediately as a legislation, but it can be done. No new natural gas connections, and you can do the same for commercial construction. It'll take a couple more years, in my opinion. And you have to convert existing buildings. Transportation, make public transportation a free public utility. Others are doing it, Luxembourg. Ban new petroleum vehicles. Now this has to be done statewide, so there's an Annapolis collaboration. Need state transportation funds. And you have to create a lobbying arm that's very strong in Annapolis. We're the biggest, richest county. Community choice legislation, double the net metering for solar, smart grid infrastructure regulatory rules, increase the efficiency goal, affordable energy program for low-income households so they don't get hurt while we are jiggering around the business model, ban new fossil fuel related investments, and establish a Maryland Center for Agricultural and Industrial Sustainability. This is a favorite of mine. We're not paying attention to cement and steel and things like that. Okay, out of the box ideas, and this is the last slide. Give property tax rebates for converting the residential lawns to organic food production and support them with suitable marketing. Many won't like this. Tax residential lawns. 10,000 square feet is a lot of lawn. It's more than most plots on which detached houses are built. Turn buildings into carbon sequestration centers. That's where that Materials Institute comes in. And join energy transportation into a new planning system. You've probably heard about this, so I'll stop there. There are more out-of-the-box ideas you could come up with, and they will be needed, but these previous things, transportation, buildings, electricity and buildings are most doable, and the county should go ahead and do them, especially mandating the rooftop solar and so on. That should be done now. There are a lot of things that can be done now. It's pretty close to 2027. And transportation, the county has to work very hard to do the same in Maryland as they have done in California and are doing around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arjun. That was great. And for all those who are attending, I think if you got questions about any of these particular innovative out-of-the-box ideas, we can explore those more during the Q&A session, so that would be great. So our next speaker is Sunni Wissmer. She's an experienced development planner who manages International Living Future Institute's extensive Living Future network composed of the Living Future accredited ambassadors, partners, and affiliates in more than 70 nations who are creating living products, buildings, and communities. She is also responsible for the Institute's office plants. In past positions, Sunni has led and facilitated diverse teams in the United States, Australia, Peru, Bolivia, Uganda, Sierra Leone, and Nicaragua. She has also executed affordable housing and business development projects in Cambodia and Guatemala. Sunni, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you, Carl, and thank you, Arjun. That was fantastic. Hey, everybody. My name is Sunni Wissmer, and I'm just delighted to be with you all today. I'm not going to share slides, but I am going to drop a website in the chat for you all to sort of take a look at what we do at the International Living Future Institute and follow along. So as Carl was explaining, we offer a number of different programs at the Institute, all of which are targeting what we call a living future, which we have been talking about so far today. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that email address, livingfuture.org, and you can go ahead and follow along with me there. So essentially, what is the Living Future Institute? We are a global NGO headquartered in Seattle. We've got 40 staff all over the country, in fact, in several places around the world these days. And we've got about 1,500 members. So as far as NGOs go, we're not as big as others you might have heard of in the climate movement and in the social justice movement. But we do have a pretty big footprint, and I like to think we accomplish a lot for ourselves. So effectively, our mission is to catalyze the transformation towards communities that are socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. And we do that through a variety of ways. I would like to say, in fact, our founder often says that we are a philosophy first, a advocacy tool second, and a certification platform third. And so you can think about some of the other rating systems or codes that you're familiar with that state a performance level for buildings or for products. A lot of the time that's still, so if we think about this as an axis of true sustainability being above, you've got like code down here and then sort of a lot of green and high performance buildings. And then our programs like to be up here really in what we call regenerative design. So actually pushing past sustainability and thinking about how we can improve upon the places that we live and the communities that we are a part of. So we've got a variety of ways that we do this. We offer a couple of programs. The Building Challenge, the Living Building Challenge that you might have heard of is our most famous flagship program. We also offer a community and a product challenge that I won't go into too much today. And then for buildings, we also offer a zero carbon certification, a zero energy certification, and the core green building certification, which is a portion of the Living Building Challenge. We also offer the Declare label, which is an ingredients label for products, the Just label, which is a transparency label for businesses, similar but a little bit more stringent than B Corp, and the Reveal label, which is for buildings who are working on their energy performance but aren't quite at a zero carbon or zero energy level yet. So there's a lot of programs coming out of this one small organization. And when we talk about what a living building is, we're really not just talking about a green building. We're talking about really trying to make a statement, as one of our former clients, Josh Wise, who is the former director of workplace ecology over at Etsy, says, the standard is a statement to our employees about how much we value their health and happiness. So we play very well with other green building standards. We love anyone to build a green building as best they can, but we are definitely the most aspirational in the market. And so we're scaling, we're growing, and we've got a number of companies that have signed on to bring our program to their entire portfolio. Some of those are just specific to us out here in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, but some names that you might recognize who have volume certification commitments with us are Google, Salesforce, and Kingspan. So really looking at tech, manufacturing, and a lot of other industries. We've got about, at this point, I want to say, we've got about 140 certified projects around the world, or just shy of that number, and just over 700 registered projects. So while the number of projects that have completed our certification is not as much as other certifications, we've got a lot of people that are coming up the pipeline, which is pretty cool. And the thing that really sets our certifications apart, especially with our buildings, is we do ask for 1 year of performance for all of our programs. So you have to demonstrate that the building actually accomplishes its energy, water saving, and other goals. What's the value of doing this, you ask? Living buildings must be like flowers, as some of you who have traveled to our website are probably learning as you click through. You have to collect all your own water. You have to collect all of your own energy over a 12-month period. Your building must be beautiful, which we hold to be biophilic. Biophilia, love of life. How is your building like a flower in more than just its function? How does it really tackle the specific climatic challenges and embrace the culture and the place that it is a part of? Well, there's a couple other pieces to the value of this program. Proven performance, industry recognition, and investment in people, and prioritization of really the things that are really important to all of us as we build these buildings. So proven performance, we've got, as I mentioned, third-party auditors that verify this performance. Living buildings often use 75 to 90% less energy than standard construction. Pretty cool. Industry recognition, our buildings are among the healthiest and most efficient in the world. So we've got a bunch of case studies on our website that I invite you to click through under programs if you haven't already done so, and check out some of those industry partners. We regularly are recognized with national and international media attention. So if you're looking to build one of these types of buildings, I'm happy to chat with you about it, but we're regularly featured in New York Times, Huffington Post, Fast Company, Fortune Magazine, CNN, countless other trade journals and online publications. Oh, and investing in the future. So we've got some great testimonials from some of our clients, one of which is Dennis Hayes, who's the CEO or president of the Bullitt Foundation. And he says about our programs that these buildings have to make money, and they do. They're buildings that make great financial sense for institutions. In fact, Dennis owns the building that I usually work out of when we're not during COVID-19, the Bullitt Center in Seattle. And we've got that case study on our website for all of you to check out as well. Finally, prioritizing people. So living buildings and all of ILFI's programs prioritize occupant health, well-being, and productivity through healthy material selection. So thinking back to Declare and the chemicals that are actually going in our materials, access to fresh air and daylight. And so just a quick statement from Google on a project they finished in 2017. Our priority was to have a workplace that is the healthiest environment possible, and to design a place that inspires and empowers our employees to perform their best every day. And that's why they went with our program, which is pretty cool. So how are folks accomplishing this? As Carl mentioned, my specific role at the Institute is to work with all of our volunteer ambassadors around the world. So these are people in 70 countries that are actually working with their clients to pursue our programs, which is pretty cool. And as part of that work, they are working with many times local policymakers to create incentives and a political climate that's friendly. So I was asked to share, and I'd love to share a few examples with you about things that our volunteers are doing and examples of things that you can probably get involved in as well. So here in Seattle, we have a really exciting pilot program which offers additional height or floor area to projects that are pursuing our programs, which is pretty sweet. The city of Portland is starting to be in discussions about incentives that make sense for them to better incentivize our projects and our programs. We've also got some conversations underway in Los Angeles, and the city of Miami also has a policy that allows additional floor area to projects that are pursuing our programs, as well as other green building programs. Internationally, we've had conversations with a lot of different places that we have yet to have any policies passed, but we do have sample language for those of you who are interested. I'll finish off just with a couple of other things that we offer. We offer a accreditation if you're interested in learning more about any of this or making your next project a living building or one of these types of buildings. I'm happy to chat with you about that. We also have a great community if you're considering becoming a member. We have a lot of other resources like project calls, summits, access to our project team dashboard and lots of information, as well as just a great community of people who are trying to advance this in their own community, even when they're not working on a building. So I will just leave you with a quote from a gentleman named Ricky Santini, who's the executive director at the Phipps Conservatory, one of our buildings, who's worked in one of these spaces for several years now. And he says, once you work in a living building or a project like this, you can never go back. And I think that that's certainly my experience working in the Bullitt Center as well. So just wanted to chat with you all about that a little bit. I hope that that's a great short overview, and happy to take questions or tell you more about anything that was interesting or any of the specific programs once we go to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. It sounds like ILFI is really pushing the envelope in terms of high quality buildings, and it's great. It's great what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our final speaker is Edward Yim. Edward is an energy policy analyst for the District of Columbia, Department of Energy and Environment. In this role, he develops decarbonization and resilience strategies and advises on issues concerning energy system transition. He led the effort to develop the district's grid modernization roadmap, as well as the district's climate and energy plan called the Clean Energy DC. Currently, he is leading a team developing the district's strategic electrification roadmap funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. He is also working to develop a net zero energy neighborhood pilot, as well as a solar plus storage residential microgrid pilot. His background includes energy law and architecture, and he's a certified passive house consultant. So Edward, please join us.
Great. Well, good evening, folks. It's a pleasure to share our work with you, and I want to thank TCM and all of you for your attention to these urgent matters. I just have a couple of slides that I just wanted to share with you in terms of the particular piece of this decarbonization work that we're doing. So first, we recognize in DC that a wealthy city like ours, in a wealthy country like ours, have an obligation to accelerate our climate change action and to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint. And key component of that is really transitioning away from the fossil fuel infrastructure. The rough calculation that we have done a couple of years ago showed that we as a city pay about $1.8 billion every year in importing and consuming fossil fuels. And it's absolutely imperative that we use those dollars instead to reinvest in our city and to build a new renewable energy infrastructure. We will never achieve the Paris Agreement goals unless we replace the gut of our energy system, which is still currently based on fossil fuel. So our energy plan recognized the need to phase out the use of natural gas. The Clean Energy DC plan that Carl just mentioned specifically calls out phasing out the use of natural gas and other fossil fuels in our buildings. And this is, some of you may recognize that this is the third pillar of the decarbonization pathway framework, which is fuel switching. And in our context, it's really electrification. And the first two pillars being, energy use reduction and decarbonized energy supply. So we think that in DC, we are ready to electrify our buildings. Most of the buildings that we do have are should not be difficult to electrify, and it can provide environmental and economic benefits today. So how do we do that? We think one thing that can really help is having a data-driven planning process to establish the framework for transitioning away from this fossil fuel infrastructure. And in particular in DC, we're really talking about the natural gas infrastructure. And I'd like to introduce some of the basic components of that framework. So first is we want to locate which buildings are using fossil fuels. And then we want to find out the substitution potential of those buildings with renewable energy that's generated on site. Then we want to find out what impact electrification of those buildings will have on the grid in terms of demand, and whether the grid has the capacity to accommodate the on-site renewable energy at those locations. In terms of prioritization, we definitely want to electrify those buildings first in those neighborhoods with leaky natural gas pipes. And those avoided pipe repair costs, which are significant, will also add to the benefit. So once these buildings are made more efficient with on-site renewable energy and demand response capability, these buildings can in effect act as a virtual power plant. And this is a term that some of you have, I have no doubt that have already heard. Which just means that they can provide energy services instead of merely consuming energy. And we can also make sure that the electrification of these buildings will help us reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the grid even further by avoiding the use of fossil fuel peaker plants. So these are the sort of the issues that we want to coordinate. They require a fair amount of specific location-based analysis, as well as some of the, the time or the temporal analysis. So what they generally kind of look like is, I won't go through in detail all of these maps, but I just wanted to just identify what types of information we're trying to glean when we do this type of locational analysis. So the first map, number one, is the map that shows our approximate understanding of where the buildings in DC are that are using fossil fuel or more or less natural gas. So so that we get some sense of where they are. And then the next map is the second one. It's again sort of a preliminary exercise that we're doing, where you see sort of the blue hues and green hues are the areas where it is telling us that rooftop solar has the potential to offset a significant amount of that building's energy use. Yellow and red would be sort of would tend to offset not a significant amount of the total energy use. So this is kind of already, I can kind of see that there's a decent match of where you see a lot of the buildings are using natural gas can be matched or substituted with on-site renewable energy. Again, it's not saying that it can be completely replaced by on-site renewable energy, but the significant amount can be offset, which really helps with the economic benefits of using local on-site solar, as well as the environmental benefits. And then the third map is really showing the what we call the host, or what the industry calls the hosting capacity map. So it is essentially PEPCO's way of figuring out to what extent how much local solar can be installed on these buildings before they cause some sort of an operational problems from the perspective of PEPCO's grid management. So again, in terms of the color codes, where you see a lot of blues and greens, is generally a go, that there should be ample room or the ability of PEPCO's grids at those locations to absorb or accommodate rooftop solar. Whereas goes towards yellow, red, and brown, the answer is sort of negative. So again, there's a fairly decent match of where we have a great number of solar offset potential with where PEPCO is showing that there is ample room. And I just also want to caution that this map is taken from PEPCO's website. It's their claim of how much hosting capacity there is. And I think there is a need to sort of independently examine and evaluate, how much room there actually may be. So again, not just taking their word as Bible, but I mean, certainly we can use their assessment as the starting point. But there may in fact be more hosting capacity in some areas or less hosting capacity in other areas, depending on closer examination. So one map that I'm missing right now that I'm really trying to figure out how to get is a map that shows the amount of leaks per neighborhoods at this level of detail. So I am missing that map showing where we have leaky pipes in our neighborhoods, but I'm working on getting that. Then once we have all of that information sort of overlaid, it will help us identify which particular neighborhoods, and for the principle of equity, we want to prioritize whenever possible, starting with the low to moderate income neighborhoods. So those are wards 5, 7, and 8, which is essentially the eastern side of the city. So it'll start to tell us which particular neighborhoods are more ready to be electrified from an economic perspective and energy perspective. So that will help us, that will give us some sense of how we can sequence and prioritize the electrification of our neighborhoods. And once we have that, and when some of these buildings start to become smart, as Dr. Makhijani mentioned, alluded to about smart grid and buildings being able to interact with with a grid in a more smart way or automated way, and so that they can really become a virtual power plant where they can provide energy services, then we can really use those capabilities to really avoid the use of the high demand with the fossil fuel power plants that are called on when our energy use is particularly high, when our energy demand runs very high, like on the hottest day of summer, coldest day of winter. So we can try to figure out how to avoid the use of those, how to avoid calling on those really dirtiest of power plants during those times. And in order to do that, so again, the fourth map is showing sort of where some of these power plants are. The blue dots in the map 4. The blue dots are the natural gas power plants. The brown dots in Virginia, particularly in Virginia, are the ones that are still running on oil, which is really some of the dirtiest power plants that we still have. And we really need to retire the use of those. And how we do that is by controlling our own energy demand. The fifth one I won't really go into here. I mean, but that's just generally just to figure out, to make sure that our energy demand in the summer, in the hottest days of summer and coldest days of winter, are managed well in a way so that we can actually reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of our electric grid as well. So I think those are the general components of the types of data and types of issues that you can start to really weave together to figure out how we actually transition and get off of the natural gas system for heating our buildings. So I'll stop there and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Edward. Very interesting analysis going on there. I'd like to learn more about that over time. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to, we have 3 local panelists. We're very excited to have each of them here to at least make some initial remarks about what they think it can be applicable at the county level in Montgomery County from the ideas we've heard from the speakers and their own experience. So we're going to start with Gina Matthias. Gina is the sustainability manager for the city of Tacoma Park and has 20 years of experience in the environmental field. She has directed energy efficiency projects working for an energy efficiency contractor, worked at an environmental think tank in Washington, regional advocacy and educational organizations, and has experience working with organic farms. In her current role with Tacoma Park, Gina is focused on developing and implementing plans to help the city achieve its goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions citywide by 2035 and incorporating equity and resilience into all sustainability programs for the municipality. She earned her Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Education, Communication and Interpretation from Ohio State University and a Sustainability MBA from Green Mountain College. So Gina.
Thank you. And those,
the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carl. And thank you to our presenters. They were really wonderful. It's great to hear everything going on in Washington, D.C. and the efforts to get fossil fuels out of our buildings. That's something in Tacoma Park I'm very interested in achieving for the city and to help push Montgomery County towards its goals. In this past March, our city council adopted a climate emergency response resolution, and part of that resolution includes a goal to become a fossil fuel free community by 2045. So Edward, I think that I will be tapping into some of your experience there shortly for some ideas and guide for the city. You talked a lot about buildings, and we heard from about the living buildings, which I would hope that at some point could be written into the code. So instead of making commercial buildings be LEED certified, if we could make that on our step forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about transportation, since that hasn't been talked a lot about, because we have some projects in Tacoma Park that I think speak to our wanting locally implementable efforts that can be implemented right now without the need for policy changes and without the need for a lot of effort. So one of the things that happened in Tacoma Park in the last year is upgrading our bus shelters. And this effort is focused on upgrading the bus shelters to make riding the bus, taking that public transportation easier, more comfortable, and safer. If you have a safe, well-lit, comfortable place to wait for the bus, you're going to be much more likely to go out in the rain, out after dark, and wait for that bus. And in Tacoma Park, we have a couple of the county's new electric buses en route. So as we get more electric buses riding through the county, we need to think about how to get people to actually step out of their houses, leave their car at the curb, and take that bus. Another thing that has been going on in Tacoma Park are some Green Street projects, again, to increase that pedestrian walkability and the safety and comfort of being out of your car and walking more. We have one on Flower Avenue in Tacoma Park that is, I think, just about completed, which should make a big difference for the people living in that part of our city. And I think that I can leave it there. I know Tacoma Park is really looking forward to how, as a city, we can both push Montgomery County in some of these big policy changes that we need in order to reach net zero emissions by 2035, but also looking to Montgomery County for the assistance so that as a city, we can reach those goals for ourselves. The building policies that I think we could learn from DC and hopefully we can have implemented in Montgomery County are things like the minimum efficiency standards. And that is great for commercial buildings. I'm really interested how that scales down to our smaller buildings and for our municipalities where we can tackle these big buildings and these big users, but at some point we've got to tackle these small users too.
All right, thank you very much, Gina. Your city's got a lot of examples that the county should probably, I'm sure they're looking at, so that's great. Thanks very much. All right, our second panelist is Sarah Miller. For over 20 years, Sarah has served in a variety of positions that have helped communities recognize and build upon their unique assets. In her work across both Pennsylvania and Maryland, she has created high-quality civic spaces, helped industrial communities reinvent themselves, supported new farmers, built technology business incubators, and managed local public art programs. Currently, Sarah is the Vice President of Strategy for the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation.
Hi there, this is Sarah Miller. It looks as though the host has stopped my video, so I'm not sure what to do about that, but I will continue to talk. So my perspective on this, and thank you for having me, is that there is a continuum really of interventions that can create conditions necessary for sustainable economic development, as well as, and a big piece of that, right, is climate change and how we, oh, I'm gonna start my video, sorry. Oh, there we are, okay. And in any case, so within this continuum, we can think about obviously things that the local government can do, things that we can lobby the state and the federal government to do, but there's also a piece that has to do obviously with consumer decision-making and how businesses and entrepreneurs can be encouraged and supportive and in some cases incentivized to look at climate change. And so just, briefly, and I know that we all know this, that obviously local supply chain is something that our agency wants to support and helps to support. I think the county does a great job, particularly in the food supply with supporting the Ag Reserve. We will have some additional programs coming out related to the pandemic, helping local merchants, as opposed to having them rely on some of the, am I allowed to say Amazon? As opposed to relying on Amazon to get all of our things here. We also have some great assets in terms of entrepreneurship with the Bethesda Green Business Innovation Lab. For those of you who are not familiar with them, they have a series of programs. Some of them are related to specific entrepreneurs. So they have an accelerator program, they have a kind of less intensive incubator program, and they certainly provide training sessions for companies who are interested in being B corporations. And speaking of B corporations, you know, social impact businesses in general are a big part of who Montgomery County is in the region. And so one of the things that we've been looking at are, you know, with a high concentration of B corporations, how do we kind of mix this type of entrepreneur with some of the potential funders and kind of wealthier folks that are here that maybe have never invested traditionally before, but we do have reason to believe that they would invest in other types of companies, social impact companies, certainly those that deal with climate change. So those are kind of the things that we can do locally as a matter of course in good community development. But one of the things that I wanted to think about a little bit more, and this is more, I guess, out of the box thinking, and it's something that may sound a little crazy, but you're going to hear about it more during the next 6 to 8 weeks. And that is the power of quantum computing and the fact that the University of Maryland is one of the leaders in that. And in addition, we have kind of what this crescent that we have, right? That is NIST, it is NIH, it is FDA, it is, you know, the University at College Park, and then kind of going up some of the DoD places. And while that might not seem like a necessary, or it might not seem very related to climate change, in fact, a lot of the efforts that have been put forth lately regarding the pandemic and a lot of the biohealth companies that have been receiving substantial amounts of money and research to try to find drug discoveries and vaccines, that can be applied in a lot of ways to climate change. And so in November, and I will send the information and everyone is invited to do this, there's going to be an economic development forum that talks about the importance of quantum computing, how it blends in with our biohealth industry. But again, I encourage us to think outside of the box, and this just happens to be the topic right now because it's timely, and certainly we have a large biotech cluster here, but there is no reason that that same thinking and those same resources cannot be, and in fact they are other places, but they cannot be targeted toward climate change. So I think, again, thinking about this whole continuum of things, not only just buying, you know, dress it up dressing and making sure that we're composting and making sure that we're helping the accelerator companies, all the way through kind of these much bigger ideas that involve a lot of industry support, but a lot of academic support, frankly, as well. It's going to be important for us. So that's all I have to say right now.
Thanks very much, Sarah. That's great. Appreciate all your input there.
Sure.
So now we have our final panelist, Scott Wilson. Scott is a vice president of the local Electric Auto Association chapter of the Electrical Vehicle Association of Greater Washington, D.C. He is a big advocate of electric vehicles. He has leased or owned 3 Nissan Leafs, a Kia Soul, a Chevy Volt, and a 2011 Think City, which I've never heard of before, but it must be a car, and has been driving EVs since 2012. So Scott, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks Carl, and thanks TCM for putting this all together. So yeah, my my slides are what I want to say. So what exactly can you do with electric vehicles in Montgomery County? And before I go into the let's see, okay, there. Before I go into the to what the carbon reduction you can actually get, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, are electric vehicles the silver bullet answer for reducing carbon? And the answer is no. There's something that I call the myth of the single solution. And the myth of the single solution says, what is the one thing that we have to do to address climate change? And the answer is there is no one thing we have to do. We have to do an entire suite of actions, and we have to do them all in parallel simultaneously. And that sounds intimidating, but the good news is that when you do one action, usually it makes other actions easier, so they reinforce each other. So in the case of transportation in Montgomery County, the more transit we have, the better. I'm all in favor of transit, and I was a daily Metro rider in pre-COVID times, and Metro's absolutely wonderful. And so for every person that we can get out of their car and onto transit, that's one less car that we have to electrify. And yet we still have to electrify a lot of cars because there is still going to be a lot of driving. You know, walkable, bikeable communities are wonderful. I love them, but there are still going to be a lot of people driving. So we have to understand what advantages you get from electric cars. So that next question we have to ask ourselves is, can you really reduce carbon emission in Montgomery County? And I'll run through the numbers. The answer is yes, substantially. And then, so what can the county be doing to help things along, to lower barriers for people to electrify their family, transportation? And what we have to do is we have to turn the conversation around from one of, what is this weird thing you're trying to convince me to do? And we have to turn that around and approach it from the viewpoint of, what's this great secret you're going to let me in on? Because there's a lot of advantages that you get from electric cars. Usually it's broken down by environmental, energy security, and cost of ownership. So I say electric vehicles wear a lot of hats. So if you care nothing about climate change, you should still want to save money, and you should still like energy security. And if you don't care about energy security, you're still like to address climate change. So, all right, next slide. So we ask ourselves, aren't you just burning coal to charge your car? And in EVADC, we do a lot of public education events with electric cars, and people ask us this sometimes. And the answer is, you are burning some coal, but you're burning an ever reducing amount of coal. And so it depends on which part of the county you live in. So the three maps across the center are just kind of overall graphical representations of how the grid has been cleaning up. So on the left is 2015, 2016, and then 2018, and the darker parts are where the dirtier parts of the grid, and the lightest blue areas are the cleaner parts of the grid. So we can see how the grid has been getting cleaner over time. So these graphics come from a report from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and the link is down on the bottom of the slide. And they want to say, well, how clean is an electric car? So the report, and this is an ongoing report that's been updated, it divides the grid up into grid regions, and Montgomery County is split up between two grid regions, RFCW, which is RFC West, I assume, and RFC East, RFCE. And the lower left picture shows, I've put around 2 red boxes. So the portion of Montgomery County that's in RFC West, it says 56 mpg. So what that is the mileage of a gas car you would have to drive in order to have the level of carbon emission that you would get with an electric car charging on that part of the grid. And the rest of Montgomery County is RFC East, 87 miles per gallon. So the higher the MPG number shown, the cleaner the grid is and the better an electric car is. So then on the lower right, that's where the arrow is pointing. That's pointing about where Montgomery County is. Okay, next slide. So you can map out by zip code which part of the county is in which part of the grid, because we have to know how many pounds of carbon are emitted per unit of energy generated on the grid. So there's a website called the EPA Power Profiler, and you can put in zip codes and and find which utility you have. And so the black parts, the black sections on the upper left, the upper county, that is an RFC West. That's the dirtier part of the grid. And that's mostly under Potomac Edison. I think there might be a mixture with Pepco, but I think that's mostly Potomac Edison. Then the gray areas in the center, kind of from Clarksville, Laytonsville, and Poolsville are a mixture of RFC East and West. And then the rest of the county, the majority of the population is in RFC East. And if you look on the power profiler and you see how much carbon is emitted, RFC East is the cleanest part of the grid. Now you can see that even when I was updating the slides, this is data as of 2018. You can see between 2016 and 2018 how things got better. So now, yeah, there's still a long way to go, but it's going in the right direction at least, and what the national average is. Okay, next slide. So in our family, we have a 2017 Chevy Bolt and a 2013 Nissan Leaf. So we want to say what is our carbon emission from transportation compared to if we were driving two average mileage ICE cars. ICE is an acronym for internal combustion engine. So we have a device in our garage that measures how much energy we use over the month. And for these 3 months pre-COVID, July, August, and September 2019, we were using about 700 kilowatt hours a month. And if you look on your power bill, it's the kilowatt hours that you pay for. And the cars typically get about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So we were doing 2,800 miles per month of driving. And so how much carbon is that? Well, on the next slide, slide 5, in RFC East, it's not shown, but it works out to 501 pounds of carbon per month in what we live in, RFC East, where our house is in Montgomery County. In West, it would be 816. So now we want to say, well, how much carbon would we would have emitted on regular gas car driving? So we assume that we had two average mileage cars. The average mileage is 28.7 miles per gallon. So that works out to 97 gallons per month that we would have been burning. And there's a calculator where you can convert that into pounds of CO2 equivalent per month. And so it works out to 1,900 pounds. Next slide. So the worst case is if we were living in RFC West, we would have emitted 816 pounds of carbon with an electric car versus 1,900 and on gas, and that would have reduced carbon emission by 57%. In the portion of Montgomery County that we actually do live in, we cut it by 73%. So these are numbers that indicate the level of carbon reduction you can achieve, that anyone can achieve, anyone driving. This is probably one of the single biggest ways to cut your carbon footprint available to an individual, short of maybe becoming a vegetarian or something. But so clearly switching the car you drive in Montgomery County can have a big carbon impact. Okay, last slide. So in Montgomery County, currently there are about 5,900 EV registrations and 3,600 plug-in hybrid registrations. I'm treating those as equivalent, anything with a plug. So, and Montgomery County has about 370,000 cars. So that's a big, there's a lot of work to do. To me, that just means let's get started right now. And statewide, there are 26,600 plug-in registrations. Maryland has a goal to hit 300,000 by 2025, which is a stretch goal, yes, but again, let's just get started right now. So what are some of the things that Montgomery County can be doing to lower barriers for people to switch? So first of all is, and these are ranked roughly in order of priority. So first of all is EV pre-wiring and new construction. So you would not require new construction to install chargers. Instead, what you want is the simple 240 volt dryer outlet installed in the garage or in the parking area. And if you do that, then you're lowering by a huge amount the barrier that the next driver, the next owner has to go through in order to put in a car charger. Another idea would be to streamline permitting. So it would be nice if you just had to fill out a form on the web or on your smartphone and send in a picture, and then, you know, that would be the permitting to install a charger. Another thing the county could do, and these are, so far, none of these are really high cost items. These are more kind of regulatory, administrative items. So the third thing is to make an EV charging one-stop advice kind of ombudsman for multifamily dwellings, campus-like workplaces and office parks. So people could, and this is, the multifamily is a big issue in Montgomery County because we have a lot of that type of housing. And there are a lot of condos and apartments that are interested in putting in charging, and it would be nice to have some guidance on how to do that.
Scott, if you can sort of go through the rest of these on a faster basis, then we can leave some time for Q&A. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sure. So then, yeah, more high-level coordination with PEPCO. We can start to electrify light poles. We have to think about people who do on-street parking and how to make their charging experience easier. You can do some financing options through a green bank, and you could work more directly with dealers. And there are some freebies you could get for EVs, although I kind of don't like freebies that much. They're okay to start off with, but so all of these, and also Montgomery County can begin transitioning to an electric bus fleet. And I know Elbridge is very interested in that. So again, we need to turn this around from what's this strange thing you're trying to get me to do to how is this going to benefit me? And it's going to give me a lot of benefits. So.
Thanks very much, Scott. That was really good detailed analysis of why we should all look at EVs seriously as to purchase. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
So let's move into the Q&A session in the last 15, 20 minutes we have. And I really appreciate some of the speakers and panelists have already been answering some of the questions that have come in through the chat. So that's very helpful. So I want to just, I think one thing we want to do here is try to get a sense of what are some priority policies or actions that the county could take to get a start on dramatically reducing our carbon footprint. Try to come to some consensus, some takeaways from this webinar. What should the county start looking at first? And what do you recommend? So I just want to open that up to all the speakers and panelists to just give us their thoughts on that based on what you've heard tonight.
Well,
let me start with Arjun, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, the easiest thing for the county to do right now, and Elrich has already expressed his wish about this, is to have a net zero building law for new detached residences. Ban new gas construction. I mean, those are the easy things because the county doesn't need money to do that. They're economical and to support any low-income people. So that's one thing. They do need to work in Annapolis to get that ban on petroleum cars after 2035. And so that I would put as a high priority. And, you know, I think the efficiency programs for existing buildings are extremely important, and community solar is very important. Doubling the net metering. These are all costless things, and the slide I actually didn't get to show or go over because I was in a hurry to finish, is we should have a wealth tax. 1% of the wealth of the richest 2,000 households will produce $3 billion, and money will not be a problem. That's not going to make them poorer. Their wealth will grow a little slower. We should have a 1% wealth tax on the 0.1% richest Marylanders as a high priority, because otherwise, every time you turn around, people are going to say, oh, well, we don't have the money, COVID-19, unemployment, It should not be a problem. The rich have gotten a lot richer even during the pandemic, and a 1% wealth tax is not going to make them poorer. And we can have the money to do all these things. We just have to have the guts to go for it. So those would be my priorities.
One thing that I think I can add in terms of priority is a bit on the negative or defense side. So, Arjun has mentioned a lot of like positive affirmative programs that will move the progress forward. But what can really hold us back is if we don't carefully check the investments that our utilities make in the infrastructure. And if the types of infrastructure investments that they make are not aligned with clean energy goals, then that will really hold us back because we are really misallocating the scarce resource of our money. So for example, like I was engaging on a chat with Herb about the funds for electrification. We tried and failed to get an electrification fund during the AltaGas Washington Gas merger. And we failed to get that. But then going forward, Washington Gas, along with many other natural gas utilities, are pushing for a very aggressive pipe replacement program over the next 30 or 40 years. This is essentially the justification is that, well, our pipes will eventually get old, so we might as well replace them as quickly as we can now. Like this is different from leak repair program. This is just pipe replacement program. If these things cost several $billion just for DC, I imagine the cost in Montgomery County would be much higher. If you allow costs like that to just sail through, I mean, just imagine what that money can do in terms of electrification and getting completely off gas and avoiding the need to use natural gas, period. So you have to just make sure that those investments are aligned. So that's a defensive posture that I just want to mention.
Totally support you.
Another aspect of this, I think, is we've got to out-organize everybody that is trying to stick to these old-fashioned and outdated ways of doing this. I loved Sarah's comments about creative incentives and supporting small business to really tackle some of these issues. I think there's a lot of viable, profitable options. And in answering some questions, I've dropped some of them in the chat as well. I mean, I think that there's a lot that we can do to just do the old-fashioned work of doing what we're doing here tonight, gathering together, exchanging ideas, talking to one another. And I think that that actually has a greater impact than a lot of people realize. Is the number one reason in my line of work that people don't build living buildings is because they just don't know about them. And I think that a lot of the reasons why people, our friends and neighbors, aren't supporting and aren't voting for these types of things when they come up, or aren't joining in or starting these types of businesses, is because they just don't know that the opportunity exists. And I think while it might seem a little bit silly to continue to talk about this to everyone, I think we all have a responsibility as good citizens, whether it's of the county that you all are based in or anywhere where we live, to continue to make those really important pieces of information known to our friends and neighbors and even people we don't usually normally talk to about this sort of thing.
Priority, I think, also is for looking at that building electrification of our existing buildings and setting into the county's timeline now how we encourage, how we set policy, give people some deadlines for converting their existing buildings. We know that natural gas systems don't last forever. I know I have to replace my furnace. I know I have to replace my water heater. They're at the end of their useful life. Can the county pass some incentives or policies that require or incent homeowners and small businesses and our larger buildings to make those replacements when they need to be made with an electric option or a non-fossil fuel-based option. Does that mean we have to provide incentives? Can we provide incentives until 2027? And at 2027, you no longer have the option. You can't replace your gas furnace with another gas furnace. You're going to have to choose another option. I think that those are the kind of policies that we have to really look hard at if we're going to actually get somewhere by 2035. It's not that long. These replacement cycles are long though. We have people who hold on to their boilers for 35, 45 years. We have people hold on to their water heater for 25 years, even though they're not supposed to, last that long. They do. So we have to really put some timelines in place, and we need to do it soon so that we can hit people at those natural replacement cycles so it's not painful. You're going to have to spend $7,000. We're going to have you spend the same amount of money, but in a way that is better for the climate. And we need to get that in place now.
Okay, so let me also ask you, throw out a question, if I may, about equity and justice in this era of the pandemic and climate change impacts. If we want to enhance the well-being of all of the residents in the county and ensure that, how do we make sure that the benefits and costs are distributed equitably? And are there opportunities to transform the way we live and work to help ensure that this well-being, we can ensure this well-being for all the residents? How do we address that?
Well, Carl, the most important thing is the Affordable Energy Program, which was studied by the Public Service Commission, recommended by the Office of People's Counsel and the PSC staff, limiting utility bills of households to 6% of income. That's very affordable. It would cost about $150 million or so. As I said, if we have a wealth tax, there will be plenty of money to do this all. And this has to happen at the Annapolis level. There's plenty of support for it. I'm chair of Energy Advocates, which is a coalition advocating for low-income people. And in addition, if we do community solar, right, and enroll low-income people, their cost of electricity will go down, plus they will have renewable energy. We really have to do community solar for low-income people. It's already happening. The county has a green bank. There's a very good director. I work with him, Tom. And but we have to accelerate all of these things, and it has Annapolis components. And I think, as a high priority, I put two really good, smart, experienced people, Annapolis people in the county staff to get things done there. We will need that.
I would say listen to your neighbors and believe what they tell you. Speak to folks that this are adversely impacted by. I'm not as familiar with the demographics of the county as some other areas, but I definitely think that a lot of this just comes back to having those kitchen table conversations and really getting to understand what folks are struggling with. And as we're all having this conversation here today, there's lots of other folks that you can go out and have this conversation with, I'm sure that you know of in your life. And I just can't overemphasize the importance of that and the responsibility that we all have to continue to make these issues known and to believe people when they say, hey, this would really help me. Because I think many of us in this virtual room have had these conversations before. And I think that it's really important that we believe people when they tell us what it is that they're struggling with and how we can help them.
But in DC, this is just one component of the broad issue of equity and fairness, is that is the health impact of using natural gas appliances. So in DC, we have a very high asthma rate of our children. We have a lot of absenteeism in our elementary school and middle school due to these health issues. and which has a lifelong impacts on their earning potential and so forth. And all these studies have been done. So really just improving the indoor air quality and also just eliminating sort of a safety concerns from potential explosions of leaky natural gas pipes. That's something we actually talk about pretty regularly. And when we talk about transitioning away from natural gas in these homes, in these neighborhoods, we generally are not going to start with talking about the climate, but really just about improving their indoor air quality and safety issues.
Yeah, one thing that, one thing I would say about electric vehicles is there's a perception that everything's Tesla, and everything is not Tesla. In fact, most of what's going on with electric vehicles is not Tesla. And what we have to understand is the way that cars are replaced. So new cars are bought, then they enter a chain of ownership. So by buying a new car or leasing new cars, which is what we did, you're feeding the supply of used cars in the future, and then more used cars are available for people, and that's going to necessarily be the case as the fleet's electrified.
Yeah, and those electric cars are cheaper to operate, so that is another, great way to look at the equity issue of electrifying our vehicle fleet. Is they're more affordable to own and operate over the long term. And we do have assistance programs in the county for homeowners and for businesses. But those assistance programs really help with efficiency. And if we can work with the state and the county entities that administer those assistance programs to low and moderate income homeowners, to make sure that when they're doing these whole home energy efficiency makeovers, they're doing that not just to reduce energy bills, but also meet these indoor air quality efforts, and also to move away from fossil fuels, we can utilize those existing programs in a new way.
Great. Okay. So let's just look. I'm looking at the chat here. So maybe the folks that have talked about natural gas, trying to reduce our dependence on that in the communities. So are there any successful efforts that you're aware of? You must be looking at other best practices in other cities that might be a roadmap. I know, Edward, you're developing a very sophisticated data analysis program to find out where best to replace natural gas with solar. But what are other cities doing that are really innovative that might be good examples for the county to look at?
One example that I can think of is Boulder, Colorado. I don't know the status of this program now, but they used to go through their available public records to figure out when these natural gas appliances and equipment or fossil fuel equipment in homes were permitted, and they try to estimate. They estimate when the end of their life of these equipment are going to be, and based on their estimates, and they also do their own modeling of these buildings just based on estimations and assumptions about what buildings. How much energy these buildings use. So then around the time that they think these buildings will need a new system, they send them a whole incentive package that combines their rooftop solar incentive with EV purchase incentive and air source heat pump incentives. They'll kind of bundle it all together. And then they'll give you this financial analysis that shows, how if you take advantage of these incentives, then you should come out cash flow positive. Then comparing to buying a new, replacing it with another natural gas boiler and continuing to drive their fossil fuel car. and not putting rooftop solar on their homes. So they'll just do this kind of financial analysis that's kind of easy to read for them. And obviously they're not promising, and it's not enough that what the incentive package that they promise is not enough to cover the whole 100% of the cost, but they just give you the breakdown of how it will, in the medium term, will work out better for them. So I think I need to follow up on how that program is, what kind of success they're having with that. But I know that that was a kind of an innovative product that they rolled out. And I think that model had been used in some of the Scandinavian countries as well, in terms of just bundling all these incentive packages so that the homeowner doesn't have to go out and find EV incentive in one place and then go out to another place and get an air source heat pump rebate and then go to another place and figure out rooftop solar. Instead of doing that, if you can kind of cut all those complicated steps out of the homeowners time and do some of that work for them, then I think that's something I think that's worth pursuing or considering, doing that kind of legwork. Similar kind of ideas have been mentioned by other speakers here, like having sort of an ombudsman to take care of these kind of more technical issues that the homeowners may not have the time or the attention span to deal with. So having sort of a concierge service or ombudsman, or just really a shopper's helper for clean energy transition for homeowners, I think having that kind of help can be useful.
Great, thank you. Well, we're at 9 o'clock, and so I want to be cognizant of people's time this evening. I really appreciate everyone joining for 90 minutes of this discussion. I think it's been really good. I want to thank all of you for joining, and a special thanks to our keynote speakers and panelists for sharing their ideas and taking their time to give us their viewpoints. So as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be sending out to all registrants a follow-up email with a webinar recording. And just want to encourage all of you to stay tuned for the release of the draft emergency ECARP in late November, so you can get a chance to start looking at this and think about providing your comments to the county, which are due by the end of January. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, and stay well, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.